Jake Morrison sat in his small apartment in Denver, watching the news on his old television. The reporter talked about a crisis on a distant world called Kepler 442b. Thousands of people were dying from a terrible plague. They needed help badly. The Galactic Peacekeeping Coalition was asking for volunteers. Not soldiers, not fighters, just people who wanted to help save lives. Doctors, nurses, engineers, anyone with skills that could help the sick and dying. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. At 34 years old, he had seen enough war to last forever. 5 years as a Marine, 3 tours of duty fighting in places most people never heard of. Now he worked as a paramedic, saving lives instead of taking them. It felt good to help people instead of hurt them. His phone buzzed. A text from his partner at the ambulance service. "You seeing this coalition thing on the news? They need medics." Jake looked at the small metal object sitting on his kitchen table. It looked like a simple trophy or award. Most people would think it was just a piece of junk metal. But Jake knew what it really was. He picked it up and felt its cold weight in his hands. The news showed pictures of the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Families crying over their dead. Children lying in hospital beds too weak to move. The coalition ships floating in space above the planet, keeping everyone trapped there so the sickness would not spread to other worlds. Jake had been a Marine. He knew how to fight and kill, but that was his old life. Now he was a paramedic. He saved people. That is what he wanted to do on Kepler 442b. Save people. He walked to his computer and opened the Coalition volunteer website. The application was long. They asked about his medical training, his experience with emergency medicine, his education. They also asked about military service. Jake paused at that question. He could lie, say he was never a soldier, but they would find out. The Coalition had good computers and smart people. They would discover his Marine record eventually. He told the truth. Former Marine, now working as a paramedic for 3 years, no recent combat experience, just medical work. 2 days later, his computer chimed with a message. The Coalition wanted to interview him by video call. Jake put on his best shirt and sat in front of his computer camera. The alien on the screen looked like a tall blue person with 4 arms. She spoke perfect English with a strange accent. "Mr. Morrison, we see you were in your military. We want only non-combat volunteers for this mission. Can you promise us you will not engage in any fighting?" Jake nodded. "I became a paramedic because I wanted to help people, not hurt them. I volunteer to provide medical aid only. No fighting." The alien made notes on her computer. "Good. This mission is strictly humanitarian. We have military forces to handle security. Your job is to save lives." "That is exactly what I want to do," Jake said. A week later, Jake got his acceptance letter. He would leave Earth in 10 days. The letter told him to bring only medical supplies and personal items. No weapons of any kind. The Coalition would provide food, housing, and transportation. Jake packed his medical bag with care. Bandages, medicines, emergency tools, everything a paramedic might need in a disaster zone. At the bottom of his bag, wrapped in a soft cloth, he placed the small metal trophy. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on his door the night before he left. She brought him cookies and worried about his safety. "Space travel sounds dangerous," she said. "And this plague sounds terrible." "I will be careful," Jake promised. "I am just going to help sick people get better." Mrs. Chen hugged him goodbye. "You are a good man, Jake Morrison. Come home safe." The next morning, Jake took a shuttle to the Coalition spaceport in Colorado. The place was huge, with ships from dozens of different worlds. He had never seen so many different types of aliens in one place. A robot checked his bags and papers. It found his medical supplies and nodded approval. It did not pay attention to the small metal object at the bottom of his bag. Jake joined a group of other human volunteers. There was Dr. Lisa Park, a woman about his age who studied diseases. She seemed very smart and talked a lot about the plague on Kepler 442b. There was also Carlos Vega, an engineer who built things. He was young and excited about seeing other worlds. "This is my first time off Earth," Carlos said as they walked toward their ship. "I cannot wait to help those people." "The plague sounds really bad," Dr. Park said. "The reports say it spreads fast and kills quickly. We will have our work cut out for us." Jake listened but did not say much. He had learned in the Marines that sometimes it was better to watch and listen before talking. Their ship was called the Harmony. It was white and clean, with a big red cross painted on the side. Inside, everything was designed for medical work. Operating rooms, hospital beds, laboratories for studying diseases. As the ship lifted off from Earth, Jake looked out the window at his home planet, getting smaller. He touched the small lump in his bag where the trophy was hidden. The other volunteers were excited and nervous. They talked about helping people and saving lives. Jake wanted to help too. But something felt wrong about this mission. In the Marines, he had learned to trust his instincts when something did not feel right. The Coalition had been very specific. Non-combat volunteers only. No weapons. No fighting. Just medical aid and humanitarian help. They said their military forces would handle security. But if the situation was really that safe, why did they need to be so clear about the no-fighting rule? And why had they asked so many questions about his military background? Jake settled into his bunk for the long journey to Kepler 442b. Around him, the other volunteers talked and planned how they would help the sick colonists. Jake closed his eyes and tried to sleep. In his bag, wrapped in soft cloth, the small metal trophy waited in the darkness. It was a piece of something that had once been alive, something that had been very dangerous, something that Jake had killed with his own hands. The trophy was not just a memory of his old life as a Marine. It was a reminder of what Jake Morrison could become again if he needed to. But for now, he was just a paramedic going to help sick people. At least that is what he told himself as the ship flew through space toward Kepler 442b. The ship Harmony dropped out of hyperspace 3 weeks later. Through the windows, Jake saw Kepler 442b floating in space like a brown and green marble. It looked peaceful from far away. But Jake knew looks could lie. Coalition warships surrounded the planet. Big gray vessels with weapons pointing down at the surface. They were there to make sure nothing left the planet until the plague was stopped. "Attention volunteers," came a voice over the ship's speakers. "We are beginning our descent to Kepler 442b. Please secure your belongings and prepare for landing." Jake felt the ship shake as it entered the planet's atmosphere. Outside, he could see clouds and mountains and the dark spots where cities should be. But the cities looked empty and dark. The Harmony landed at a spaceport outside the main colony. As Jake walked down the ramp with the other volunteers, he smelled something wrong in the air. It was the smell of death and sickness. Waiting for them was Commander Zalak, a tall alien with gray skin and yellow eyes. He wore a military uniform covered with medals and ribbons. Behind him stood rows of Coalition soldiers with weapons ready. "Welcome to Kepler 442b, Commander Zalak said in a cold voice. "I am in charge of security here. You volunteers will follow my rules exactly, or you will be sent home immediately." The commander looked directly at Jake when he spoke. Jake wondered if the alien knew about his Marine background. "This is a non-combat zone," Commander Zalak continued. "You are here to provide medical aid only. No weapons, no fighting, no heroic actions. My soldiers will protect you while you do your jobs." Dr. Lisa Park raised her hand. "Commander, can you tell us more about the plague?" The reports from Earth were not very detailed. Commander Zalak's yellow eyes narrowed. "The disease spreads through contact with infected individuals. It kills quickly and painfully. The colonists who are still alive are quarantined in camps. Your job is to keep them alive until we find a cure." Carlos Vega spoke up. "What about the mining operations?" The report said the miners were still trapped in the tunnels. "The mining areas are off limits," Commander Zalak said sharply. "Too dangerous. My soldiers patrol there to make sure nothing gets out." Jake felt his Marine instincts kick in. The commander was hiding something. The way he talked about the mining tunnels, the way he avoided Dr. Park's questions about the plague, something was not right here. The volunteers were taken to a medical camp about 5 miles from the spaceport. It was surrounded by tall fences with electric wire on top. Coalition soldiers guarded the gates. Inside the camp, Jake saw the sick colonists for the first time. They lay in long rows of beds under white tents. Men, women, and children all dying from the mysterious plague. But as Jake examined the patients, he noticed something strange. These people were not just sick. They looked scared. Really scared. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of something hunting them. "Nurse Morrison," Dr. Park called. She was looking at test results from her portable laboratory. "Can you come look at these blood samples?" Jake walked over to her workstation. Dr. Park showed him images on her computer screen. "These are blood cells from the infected patients. But look at this." She pointed to strange structures in the blood. They looked almost like tiny machines or robots. They were moving through the blood, changing the cells around them. "I have never seen anything like this," Dr. Park said quietly. "This does not look like a natural disease. It looks like something artificial, something made." That night, Jake could not sleep. He walked around the medical camp, checking on patients and thinking. The sick colonists were getting worse, but not in the way diseases usually worked. Around midnight, he heard screaming from the direction of the mining tunnels. Long, terrible screams that echoed across the dark landscape. The coalition soldiers at the camp gates looked nervous. Jake walked over to one of the guards, a young human soldier named Pete. "What was that noise?" Pete looked around to make sure no officers were listening. "Happens every night," he whispered. "Something in those tunnels. Commander says it is just the wind, but we know better." "What do you think it is?" Jake asked. "Some of the guys think the plague changed the miners into something else, something that hunts at night." Pete shivered despite the warm air. "We lost a patrol down there last week. Found their equipment but no bodies. The next morning brought bad news. 3 more colonists had died during the night, but their bodies showed signs of violence, claw marks and bite wounds that had nothing to do with disease." Dr. Park was studying the bodies when Jake joined her. "This makes no sense," she said. "These people did not die from the plague. Something attacked them." Jake looked at the wounds. He had seen similar marks before, during his time as a Marine. But he kept that information to himself. Commander Zelak arrived with a squad of soldiers. "Dr. Park, I need your medical report immediately." "Commander, these colonists were not killed by disease. They were attacked by something with claws and teeth. You need to focus on your job," Commander Zelak interrupted. "Treat the sick. Leave security matters to my soldiers." After the commander left, Carlos pulled Jake and Dr. Park aside. "I have been checking the colony's computer systems. The mining operations were not shut down because of the plague. They were shut down 2 weeks before the first colonist got sick." "What were they mining?" Jake asked. "According to the records, rare minerals for weapon manufacturing. But here is the strange part. The miners found something else down there. Something the reports call biological artifacts." Dr. Park looked up from her computer. "Biological artifacts? Like what?" "The files are classified, but I managed to get a partial report. They found what looked like alien technology. Living technology. The report mentions eggs or cocoons." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. In his bag, hidden under his medical supplies, the small metal trophy seemed to grow heavier. He knew what kind of aliens laid eggs in dark places. He had fought them before. That evening, Jake volunteered for night duty at the medical camp. While the other volunteers slept, he walked among the sick colonists and listened to their whispered stories. An old miner named Bill grabbed Jake's arm with a shaking hand. "You seem like a military man," he wheezed. "You got to warn them. It was not a plague that got us. It was the things in the deep tunnels. The things that came out of those eggs?" "What kind of things?" Jake asked quietly. "Kythera," the old man whispered. "We found their breeding chambers 5 miles down. Must have been there for years waiting. When we broke through the wall, they woke up." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. He knew that name. Every Marine in the galaxy knew that name. The Kythera were the most dangerous aliens in known space. They did not just kill their enemies. They used them to breed more Kythera. "How many?" Jake asked. "Hundreds of eggs. Maybe thousands. And they are not eggs anymore." Bill's eyes were wide with terror. "They are full grown now. Hunting at night. Taking people back to the tunnels to feed the breeding mothers." Jake looked around the medical camp with new eyes. The electric fences, the armed guards, the nervous soldiers. They were not here to keep the plague in. They were here to keep the Kythera in. But Jake knew something about Kythera that the coalition commanders probably did not know. They were very smart, and they were patient. They would not stay trapped on this planet forever. In his bag, the small piece of Kythera exoskeleton that he kept as a trophy was a reminder of the last time he had faced these creatures. That battle had earned him a secret medal and a new name in coalition intelligence files. But Jake Morrison, the paramedic, was not supposed to know about any of that. He was just a non-combat volunteer, here to help sick people. At least that is what everyone believed. Jake woke up to the sound of sirens. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the medical camp. Outside his tent, he could hear soldiers shouting orders and running boots on hard ground. He grabbed his medical bag and rushed outside. Dr. Lisa Park was already there, looking worried. "What is happening?" she asked. A soldier ran past them toward the main gate. Jake grabbed his arm. "What is going on?" "Supply convoy got hit," the soldier said, breathing hard. 15 miles out. "We lost contact an hour ago." Commander Zelak appeared, surrounded by his officers. His yellow eyes looked angry and scared at the same time. "All volunteers will remain in the camp until further notice. No exceptions." "Commander," Dr. Park said, "if there are wounded people out there, we need to help them." "My soldiers will handle the situation," Zelak replied coldly. But Jake could see the fear in the commander's eyes. This was not the first convoy that had been attacked. The Cathara were getting bolder. 2 hours later, a single coalition transport ship limped back to the camp. It was covered in claw marks and bullet holes. Only 3 soldiers out of 20 had survived. Jake helped carry the wounded soldiers to the medical tent. Their injuries were terrible. Deep claw wounds, bite marks, and burns from some kind of acid. "It was not human," one of the soldiers whispered to Jake as he bandaged a wound on the man's arm. "The things that attacked us, they moved too fast to see clearly, but they were not human." Dr. Park was examining another wounded soldier when she called Jake over. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a strange wound on the soldier's leg. The wound was infected, but not with any bacteria Jake had ever seen. Instead, tiny black threads were growing through the flesh like living wires. "This is not a normal infection," Dr. Park said quietly. "These threads are trying to connect to the soldier's nervous system." Jake knew what they were looking at. Cathara implants. The aliens used them to control other species, turning them into slaves or breeding hosts. That night, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He waited until the camp was quiet, then slipped out of his tent. The guards were watching the perimeter, looking for threats from outside. They did not expect threats from inside the camp. Jake moved like a ghost through the shadows. His Marine training came back to him as if he had never stopped being a soldier. He reached the motor pool where the coalition kept their vehicles. The damaged transport from the convoy attack was there, waiting for repairs. Jake climbed inside and searched through the wreckage. In the back, he found what he was looking for, a coalition military computer, damaged but still working. Jake plugged in his portable device and began downloading files. What he found made his blood run cold. The coalition had known about the Cathara for months. They knew this was not a plague at all, but a breeding operation. The aliens had been using the human colonists as hosts to create more Cathara warriors. But the worst part was in the classified communications between Commander Zelak and Coalition High Command. They were not here to save the colonists. They were here to study the Cathara breeding process and maybe capture some of the aliens for their own research. The volunteers were not here to help. They were here as bait. Jake copied all the files and slipped back to his tent. He spent the rest of the night reading through classified reports and intelligence briefings. The picture that emerged was worse than he had imagined. The Cathara had been planning this attack for years. They had seeded the mining tunnels with their eggs decades ago, waiting for the right moment to hatch. When the human miners broke through to the deepest chambers, it triggered the awakening. The plague was actually a biological weapon designed to weaken the colonists and make them easier to capture. The Cathara needed living hosts to breed their warriors, and sick humans could not fight back effectively. Commander Zelak's forces were not trying to contain the outbreak. They were trying to contain the evidence. Once the Cathara finished breeding, the coalition planned to blame everything on a natural disaster and cover up their own involvement. The next morning brought terrible news. During the night, 12 more colonists had disappeared from the quarantine section. The guards claimed they had died from the plague, but Jake knew better. He found Dr. Park in her laboratory, staring at test results with a confused expression. "Jake, these blood samples make no sense. Yesterday, these patients were getting better. Today, their blood shows massive genetic changes." "What kind of changes?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "Their DNA is being rewritten, as if something is changing them into a different species entirely." Dr. Park looked up at him with frightened eyes. "This is not possible with any known disease." Jake made another decision. Dr. Park was smart and trustworthy. She deserved to know the truth. "Dr. Park, I need to show you something, but you have to promise to keep quiet until we figure out what to do." He took her to his tent and showed her the classified files he had downloaded. As she read, her face went pale with shock and anger. "They knew," she whispered. "They knew all along what was happening here. We are not volunteers. We are bait in some kind of trap." "It gets worse," Jake said. He showed her the intelligence reports about Kythera breeding practices. "Those missing colonists are not dead. They are being kept alive in the mining tunnels, being used as incubators for Kythera warriors." Dr. Park stared at the files in horror. "How many?" "According to the reports, maybe 1,000 colonists taken over the past 6 months. If each one produces even 2 or 3 Kythera warriors..." Jake did not need to finish the sentence. "We have to do something," Dr. Park said. "We cannot just let this happen. Commander Zelak will never let us leave. And even if we could get off the planet, the Coalition would just cover everything up." Jake looked at his medical bag, where the small trophy was hidden. "There is only one way to stop this." "What do you mean?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Dr. Park with eyes that were no longer those of a simple paramedic. They were the eyes of a Marine who had fought the most dangerous aliens in the galaxy and won. The Coalition wanted non-combat volunteers for this mission. They got what they asked for. But they forgot something important about humans. "What is that?" "We choose when to be non-combat volunteers. And we choose when to stop." That afternoon, Jake went to Carlos Vega and showed him the classified files as well. The young engineer was shocked and angry, but also scared. "What can we do?" Carlos asked. "We are just 3 people against an entire military operation. We are going to save those colonists," Jake said simply. "And we are going to make sure the galaxy knows what really happened here." "But how? We do not have weapons or military training." Jake smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been pretending to be prey for too long. "Speak for yourself, Carlos. I was never just a paramedic." That night, Jake unpacked the small metal trophy from his bag. In the dim light of his tent, it looked like what it really was. A piece of exoskeleton from a dead Kythera warrior. The last time Jake had faced the Kythera, it was in open space combat with a full Marine unit for backup. This time he would be alone in dark tunnels with nothing but improvised weapons and his knowledge of how to kill the galaxy's most dangerous predators. But Jake Morrison had a secret that even the classified files did not contain. He was not just any Marine. He was the Marine who had single-handedly killed a Kythera warlord and lived to tell about it. The Kythera were about to learn what humans were really capable of when they stopped volunteering to be peaceful. Jake held the piece of Kythera exoskeleton in his hands and remembered the day he had earned it. 3 years ago at Proxima Station, when everything went wrong and he was the only Marine left alive. The official report said that Private Jake Morrison had shown exceptional courage under fire during the defense of Proxima Station. What the report did not say was that Jake had spent 6 hours alone in the station's maintenance tunnels, hunting a Kythera warlord with nothing but a broken rifle and his bare hands. The warlord had killed Jake's entire squad. It had torn them apart slowly, enjoying their screams. But Jake had not screamed. He had gotten angry. And when Jake Morrison got angry, even Kythera learned to be afraid. That battle had earned him a secret medal and a new classification in Coalition intelligence files. Codename Deathhound, the human who killed Kythera for sport. But Jake had retired from that life. He became a paramedic because he wanted to save people, not kill them. Until now. The next morning, Jake woke up before dawn and began preparing. He moved through the medical camp like he was still just a paramedic doing his job. But everything he did had a different purpose now. He collected medical supplies, but also industrial chemicals that could be turned into explosives. He gathered surgical tools that could become weapons. He studied the camp's layout and memorized every guard position and patrol route. Dr. Park and Carlos watched him work with growing amazement. The mild-mannered paramedic they had known for weeks was transforming into something else. Something dangerous. "Jake," Dr. Park said quietly, "what exactly did you do in the Marines?" Jake looked at her with cold eyes. "I killed things that needed killing." That afternoon, Commander Zelak announced that another supply convoy would leave for the outer settlements. Jake volunteered immediately for medical support. "Absolutely not," Commander Zelak said. "After yesterday's attack, only essential military personnel will go." "People are dying out there," Jake said. "They need medical help. My soldiers can handle basic first aid. You volunteers will stay here where it is safe." But Jake saw something in the commander's yellow eyes. Fear. Zelak was not trying to protect the volunteers. He was trying to protect his operation. The fewer witnesses, the better. That night, Jake made his move. He slipped out of the medical camp using skills the Marines had taught him years ago. Moving through shadows, avoiding sensors, becoming invisible. The mining complex was 5 miles away through rough terrain. Jake moved like a ghost across the landscape, following old maintenance roads and dry creek beds. As he got closer to the mining tunnels, the smell hit him. Death and decay and something else. Something that smelled like wet metal and acid. The smell of Kythera. The entrance to the main mining shaft was guarded by Coalition soldiers. But Jake did not need the main entrance. During his weeks at the camp, he had studied the mining company's computer files. He knew about the ventilation shafts and emergency exits. Jake found a side entrance that led to the upper levels of the mine. The lock was electronic, but Carlos had taught him a few tricks about hacking security systems. Inside the mine, Jake's Marine training took over completely. He moved through the dark tunnels with perfect silence, using night vision equipment he had taken from the medical camp's emergency supplies. The tunnels were full of signs of violence, claw marks on the walls, bloodstains on the floor, and everywhere the smell of Kythera getting stronger. Jake reached a junction where 5 tunnels met. Painted on the wall in human blood were symbols he recognized. Kythera territorial markings. This was their hunting ground now. He heard something moving in the darkness ahead. Slow, deliberate footsteps, but not human footsteps. The clicking sound of Kythera claws on stone. Jake pressed himself against the tunnel wall and waited. His heart was beating fast, but not from fear, from excitement. He had missed this feeling. The hunt. A Kythera warrior came around the corner, 8 feet tall, covered in black exoskeleton armor with claws that could cut through steel. Its 4 eyes glowed yellow in the darkness as it searched for prey. Jake let it walk past him. Then he struck. The surgical scalpel went through a gap in the Kythera's armor at the base of its skull. The alien dropped without making a sound. Jake carved a small piece of exoskeleton from the dead warrior's arm. A new trophy for his collection, he continued deeper into the mine, following the smell and the territorial markings. The Kythera had built a nest in the deepest chambers, where the humans had been mining rare minerals. Jake reached an observation point overlooking the main breeding chamber. What he saw made him sick with anger. Hundreds of human colonists hung from the ceiling in organic cocoons. Most were still alive, being slowly drained of blood and genetic material to feed the growing Kythera larvae. In the center of the chamber sat the drone mother, a massive Kythera the size of a small building, constantly laying eggs that would become new warriors. Jake counted at least 50 full-grown Kythera warriors moving through the chamber. Too many to fight at once, even for him. But Jake had not come here to fight all of them. He had come to send a message. He used the industrial explosives he had brought to set charges throughout the upper levels of the mine. Not enough to collapse everything, but enough to trap the Kythera in the deeper chambers. Then he began hunting. Jake moved through the tunnels like a ghost of death. He used every trick the Marines had taught him and several they had not. Improvised traps, chemical weapons made from mining equipment, and the simple fact that he knew how to kill Kythera efficiently. One by one, the Kythera warriors fell. Jake left their bodies where other Kythera would find them, along with territorial markings of his own, not painted in blood but carved into the tunnel walls with his knife. The marking said one word in the Kythera language: Deathhound. After 6 hours of hunting, Jake had killed 23 Kythera warriors without raising an alarm. The aliens were starting to realize they were being hunted, but they could not find their hunter. Jake made his way back toward the surface, leaving a trail of dead Kythera behind him. But as he reached the upper levels, he heard alarms going off in the distance. Coalition soldiers were coming. Someone had noticed that Jake was missing from the medical camp. Jake triggered the explosives he had planted. The upper levels of the mine collapsed, sealing the Kythera breeding chambers below ground. It would not kill them, but it would trap them long enough for Jake to finish what he had started. As he emerged from the mine, Jake saw Coalition transport ships landing nearby. Soldiers were spreading out to search for him. Commander Zelek's voice echoed across the landscape from a loudspeaker. "Jake Morrison, you are ordered to surrender immediately. Return to camp and no charges will be filed." Jake looked at the piece of fresh Kythera exoskeleton in his hand. Then he looked at the Coalition soldiers surrounding him with weapons drawn. He was no longer pretending to be a peaceful paramedic. The mask had come off. Jake Morrison the Death Hound was back, and he was not finished hunting yet. "Commander Zelak," Jake called out into the darkness. "I volunteered to be a non-combat volunteer, but you broke that agreement when you used us as bait for your illegal research project." His voice carried across the rocky landscape with cold authority. "My volunteer status is officially terminated. Now I am something else entirely." In the distance, explosions echoed from the sealed mine as the trapped Cathara tried to break free, but Jake had built those charges well. It would take them days to dig out, days he planned to use very efficiently. The hunt was just beginning. The Coalition soldiers found Jake sitting calmly on a boulder outside the collapsed mine entrance. He was cleaning blood off a surgical scalpel with a medical wipe, like he was just maintaining his equipment after treating patients. Commander Zelak approached with 20 armed soldiers behind him. His yellow eyes were full of rage and something else. Fear. "Jake Morrison, you are under arrest for destruction of Coalition property and interference with a classified military operation." Jake looked up at the commander with eyes that had seen too much death. "Commander, I think you misunderstand the situation here. You destroyed valuable research assets. The Cathara specimens in those tunnels were worth millions of credits to Coalition science." Jake stood up slowly, and every soldier tensed. Even though he was not holding a weapon, something about his movements made trained warriors nervous. "Those were not specimens, Commander. Those were human beings being used as breeding cattle. And I did not destroy the Cathara. I just gave them some time to think about their situation." Commander Zelak signaled to his soldiers, "Arrest him." As the soldiers moved forward, Jake spoke again. His voice was quiet but carried clearly in the night air. "Commander, before you do something stupid, you should check my service record more carefully, not the public file. The classified one. Access code Delta 77 Alpha." Zelak paused. That was a high-level security code. Only someone with serious military clearance would know it. The commander activated his portable computer and entered the code. As he read the file that appeared, his face went pale. "Impossible," he whispered. Jake smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Hello, Commander. Allow me to properly introduce myself. Marine Gunnery Sergeant Jake Morrison, retired, also known in certain intelligence circles as Death Hound. The human who killed Warlord Kethvar at Proxima Station." The soldiers looked confused, but Commander Zelak understood perfectly. Every military officer in the Coalition knew about the Battle of Proxima Station. It was studied in war colleges as an example of what happened when you cornered a human with nothing left to lose. "You died at Proxima Station," Zelak said. "The report said no survivors. The reports lied. I was extracted by Black Ops and given a new identity. I retired from active service and became a paramedic because I was tired of killing, but you changed that when you decided to use innocent people as bait for your research project." Jake reached into his medical bag and pulled out the piece of Cathara exoskeleton he had carried for 3 years. In the light from the soldiers' flashlights, it gleamed like black metal. "This is a trophy from Warlord Kethvar. He was 12 feet tall and had claws that could cut through starship armor. He killed my entire squad and thought he would kill me too." Jake's voice was deadly calm. He was wrong. Commander Zelak was backing away now. "The Cathara in those tunnels are just drones. Worker variants. Nothing like a warlord." "You are right," Jake agreed. "They are much weaker, which is why it only took me 6 hours to kill 23 of them." The soldiers were staring at Jake with a mixture of fear and respect. They had heard stories about humans in combat, but seeing one up close was different. "But I did not come here to kill drones," Jake continued. "I came to send a message to their drone mother. A message that says humans do not make good prey." As if summoned by his words, a deep rumbling came from the collapsed mine entrance. Rock and debris began flying as something massive tried to break through from below. "She is coming up," Jake said calmly. "The drone mother does not like being trapped underground. She will try to escape through the main shaft in about 10 minutes. Commander Zelak looked panicked. "We need to evacuate immediately. A drone mother cannot be stopped by conventional weapons." "You are right," Jake said. "Conventional weapons will not work. But I am not a conventional weapon." Jake started walking toward the main mine entrance. The soldiers parted to let him pass, unsure of what to do. "Where are you going?" Commander Zelak demanded. "To finish what I started. The drone mother has been using human colonists as breeding stock. That ends tonight. Dr. Park's voice came over Jake's radio communicator. She and Carlos had been monitoring coalition communications from the medical camp. Jake, the drone mother, is massive. The mining company's records say she weighs over 50 tons. You cannot fight something that big alone. Jake touched the piece of Kythera exoskeleton in his pocket. Dr. Park, 3 years ago I faced something even bigger. And I had a lot less equipment than I have now. What equipment? Carlos asked over the radio. You just have medical supplies. Jake looked at the mining complex around him. Heavy industrial machinery, chemical storage tanks, high-voltage power lines, and explosive mining charges. Carlos, you are an engineer. What happens when you mix industrial acids with metal shavings and run 50,000 volts through the mixture? There was a pause. Then Carlos whispered, "Oh my God, you are going to electrocute her." The main mine shaft exploded upward as the drone mother broke through. She was even bigger than the records indicated. 60 feet long, covered in black armor plating with dozens of claws and acid-spitting organs. But Jake was ready for her. He had spent the last hour setting up his trap. Mining cables carrying maximum electrical current, pools of industrial acid positioned at key points, and explosive charges set to collapse specific tunnel supports. The drone mother emerged from the shaft like a living nightmare, screaming her rage at being trapped, her yellow eyes fixed on Jake standing alone in the middle of the mining complex. She charged at him with incredible speed for something so large. Jake waited until the last possible second, then rolled aside. The drone mother crashed into the first part of his trap. High-voltage cables wrapped around her armor as 50,000 volts coursed through her body. She screamed and thrashed, but the electricity only made her angrier. Her acid glands began spraying corrosive liquid in all directions. Jake used the drone mother's own acid against her. The industrial mining equipment began dissolving, creating toxic clouds that burned even her armored skin. For 20 minutes, Jake played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the massive creature, using her size against her, leading her into trap after trap, slowly wearing her down. Finally, the drone mother was weakened enough for Jake to make his final move. He triggered the explosive charges that brought down the main support beams of the mining complex. The drone mother was pinned under tons of rock and metal, still alive but unable to move. Jake walked over to her massive head. Her yellow eyes stared at him with hatred and something else. Fear. You used human beings as breeding stock, Jake said quietly. You turned them into living incubators for your offspring. That was a mistake. He raised the surgical scalpel he had been using all night. Humans do not forgive that kind of thing. Ever. When it was over, Jake carved a piece of exoskeleton from the drone mother's crest. A new trophy for his collection. Commander Zelak and his soldiers found Jake sitting beside the dead drone mother, bandaging a wound on his arm. He looked up at them calmly. The breeding chamber is sealed. The remaining Kythera drones are trapped 5 miles underground with no way to escape. The colonists who are being used as breeding stock are free and will need immediate medical attention. Jake stood up and shouldered his medical bag. I am going back to work as a paramedic now. People need medical help. As he walked past Commander Zelak, Jake stopped. Commander, in my report I will state that you and your soldiers showed great courage in helping to defeat the Kythera threat. The Coalition will probably give you medals. Zelak looked confused. Why would you do that? Jake's smile was tired but genuine. Because despite your mistakes, you are still trying to protect people. That counts for something. 3 days later, Coalition reinforcements arrived to find the Kythera threat eliminated and the surviving colonist recovering in the medical camp. Jake Morrison was back to being a quiet paramedic, treating patients and saving lives. Dr. Park approached him as he finished treating a rescued colonist. Jake, that young soldier over there keeps asking about you. He wants to know how you learned to fight like that. Jake looked at the soldier, who was barely old enough to shave. Tell him that the best way to win a war is to make sure it never has to be fought. But if someone forces you to fight, make sure they regret it so much that they never try again. As Jake packed his medical supplies, Dr. Park noticed something. You have 2 trophies now. Jake nodded, touching the pieces of Kythera exoskeleton in his bag. Reminders. Of what? Of why I became a paramedic instead of staying a soldier. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is give a warrior a reason to fight. The rescue ship arrived the next day to take the volunteers home. As they lifted off from Kepler 442b, Jake looked down at the planet through the window. The mining complex was destroyed. The Cathara breeding chambers were sealed forever. The human colonists were safe. Jake Morrison had volunteered to be a non-combat medic, but when innocent people were threatened, he had chosen to become something else. The galaxy had been reminded of something important about humans. They make excellent non-combat volunteers because they are capable of such devastating combat that they prefer to save lives instead of taking them. But when you threaten the innocent, humans stop volunteering to be peaceful, and that is when the real war begins.